we really decided to start small. So we started with just kindergarten at the elementary schools, and then middle school, I think, starts with seventh grade math. And we wanted to have a PLC group with our ESL teacher, our exceptional learners educator, all the people at the table so that they could support our tier one instruction with appropriate scaffolds, and just so that it would also give them an idea of what mastery looks like in the tier one classroom.
So we started by building a master schedule that prioritized protected time for intellectual prep and student work analysis at all three schools. This allowed them to share the same planning time as their general education team and fully participate in the weekly IP meetings. Special education teachers were also brought into these meetings, helping to ensure that planning was inclusive and reflected the needs of all of our learners.
We met together in a professional development with each grade band, 3rd through 5th grade teachers, and we started then with teacher prep, and they were to bring laptops, and we went through their unit prep to start with, and then their lesson prep. So we kind of did that as a group together, and they were able to meet with other 3rd grade teachers, other 4th grade teachers, other 5th grade teachers, because some schools only have one 3rd grade teacher. Some have several, 2 or 3.
So one of the most important things that you need to initiate if you're going to have school improvement, any kind of school improvement though, is making sure that you have a schedule in place that works for the students and works for the teachers. You have to say that we're not going to do what we've always done. We're going to change things around. We might move PE. We might move a lunchtime. We're going to create space and create time for teachers to be able to collaborate. And then we're going to give them these instructional blocks that allow them to have time to have small group instruction, that have whole group instruction though, but in a way that it flows, that prioritizes student achievement.
Our principals worked together to determine what time of day would work best for these meetings. We didn't want to pull the interventionist and the special education teacher away from other grade levels to attend these meetings. So instead of meeting during the kindergarten planning time, they actually met during the interventionist and special education teachers' planning times. And again, our principals were crucial in making sure that that happened. And then to make sure that the ESL teacher could attend all of those meetings, and the principals got together and set their meetings on different days so that the ESL teacher could be there. And then principals just supported in their building. If the ESL teacher needed to be gone at a time when they would usually have class, then they just allowed that teacher to be at the acceleration for all grade level meeting that they needed to be at.
We started in middle school because I think that was the easiest move in changing schedules, because we had 5 ESL teachers and they were serving different grades. So you may have an ESL teacher that did a pull out for 6th grade, and that same ESL teacher would do a pull out for 7th grade. Or one ESL teacher would do all newcomers in the building for 4-8. And so what we decided to do, rather than them serving multiple grade levels, that we pulled them and gave them each one grade level, which allowed for that co-planning. At the elementary school, we also looked at scheduling, and because ESL there was mostly pull out, we began to free up some of their time by pushing in, which allowed them to also attend those grade level meetings. We are still working on scheduling. So for next year, we're going to try to free up some time in our high school schedule to see how they can co-plan, like with our ELA teachers, to really emphasize ELA at the high school, because it is more difficult when you have different classes that kids are taking. So I think you really have to narrow it down to a focus at the high school, which that will be our ELA classes.
Some of the shifts that we had to put in place in order to implement this correctly was to bring in our special ed teachers as well as our parapros at some point. And so we have asked that in their schedules, and our school leaders when they make their schedules, that it includes a time for all stakeholders of those students to be involved in that. And in the unit prep and the lesson prep, we also, during a PD, brought all parapros in as well as sped teachers so that parapros had access to our curriculums and they knew how to access it before they approached the students or before they went into the class. If it was a pull in or a pull out, they had that information. So that was our biggest structure that we've had to put in place, was to make sure that they had time with all stakeholders were together at one point.
Our district team really focused on creating the systems. We looked at calendars, we set the expectations of we're going to do IEPs, student work analysis, we're going to do the cycle of continuous improvement. We set those expectations, and we also developed the tracking tools. The school leader's focus is to utilize those tracking tools. We have a tracking tool for the IPG walkthrough. We have a tracking tool for student work analysis and IP. They utilize those to identify specific narrow focus for their school or even grade levels or content areas. So that alignment has allowed us to really stay focused on improving Tier 1 instruction across the board, while administrators still have that opportunity to tailor support at each school based on their need. One of the issues that we have found with the instructional improvement cycle is time with administrators, is being present for the IP, being present for the lesson, and then being present for student work analysis. So this is a lot. The tracker system has allowed them to do an improvement cycle without maybe having to be present for each piece. So they can read what was discussed in IP. They are present for the lesson to ensure that what was talked about is being done in the classroom. And then they can either attend student work analysis, but if they can't attend student work analysis, they can read those notes to see what was discussed and to see outcomes of that lesson. We have seen success as far as scaffolds go in the classroom, because rather than trying to retrofit, like the ESL teacher may push into the classroom, but if they didn't have any idea of what was going on in the class that day, they're trying to figure that out. And then we put scaffolds in place kind of on the fly because we didn't know what was happening. So that coherent piece of, we've already thought through specific students and we've already thought through specific scaffolds that they're going to need. So they are more successful in the Tier 1 classroom because of that.
We kept saying, why aren't we getting the results that we really anticipated that we might get at first? And when we really did an analysis of the work that we were doing and the schools were doing, the needle kept pointing to that the student work, the students were doing the work that the teachers were asking them to do. But it wasn't with the rigor that they were responding to the written work that we really felt like were going to get us to mastery levels for our students. So that's why we really thought the student work analysis place was the place to land.
We started kind of with student work analysis and lesson prep happening separately from each other, but as we went through the school year, we've really started tightening the link between those two processes. And now we are really looking at student work analysis in service of lesson prep. So we've definitely seen our teachers be more prepared with scaffolds and differentiated instruction for different groups of students. And we know that we think that that is going to improve student outcomes.
The data that we're using now is just so much more precise and so much more relevant day to day. Before we were using, some of these larger benchmarks that were coming around every couple of months, but now that we're using the data trackers where we're progress monitoring every week and we're providing kind of real-time data that's informing teachers on the kids' deficits and their growths, it is way stronger. Classroom teacher is owning that data because they're the one progress monitoring and they're the ones inputting that data. In the past, a lot of times the data that we use to develop an IEP might be the main information that we use to guide a student forward and how we're going to provide them with the resources needed. But the data tracker that we're using now really provides even the special education teacher, not just the regular teacher, weekly progress monitoring that really ties into that tier one instruction, but also looks back at that student's specific deficits and allows instruction to be planned forward. So not only has it really strengthened our classroom teacher's ability, but it also has really impacted our special education teacher and the work that they do together and the collaboration with our team and providing for those students.
One of the things that I think that's hard about this work, whether you're a small district or a large district, is getting all the stakeholders at the same table and having the same mindset, the same goals, the same expectations. We did roll out a roles and responsibilities guide very early on too, so that way we would know who was responsible for what information. We've had to go back and look at that several times and rethink maybe that's not the person or the place that needs to land. Maybe that needs to be the responsibility of some other person that might have more access to the data, maybe more access to the teachers. The other thing is there are lots of tools out there, and sometimes that can be a little overwhelming. So making the tools personable or making them work for your school district, making them working for your schools, and then always listening to feedback so that way teachers, principals, instructional coaches feel like their voice is being heard, and that you're taking it to heart and doing what's best for the students in your school district. So some of the trade-offs we had to do is really think about our PLC time. What would work when you start asking your exceptional learner teachers to come in, speech teachers, ESL teachers to come in, because they've got multiple grade levels they need to. So when we started thinking about, okay, where can we start small and just have them push in there, and then changing those schedules as needed so they weren't missing the same classes all the time. One of the other trade-offs that we had is at the district level, we really thought we would come in with a system of this PLC would be data, the next PLC would be IPG, the next one would have another topic, lesson prep and all. And we realized some of those things didn't necessarily need to live at the district level. They needed to live at the school level. So we've gone sort of in and out with those different topics for our PLCs, finding a comfort level. Is that really district information to be rolled out or district work? Or is that really school level and down to the teacher work?
Some of the trade-offs that we had to make is we kind of had to rethink our traditional scheduling models and what that looked like. We had done ESL a certain way for so long, and so we kind of had to blow that up and rethink that and reduce the fragmented supports, right? Because ESL had always used a different curriculum. And so now they are going to be using the tier one curriculum. And what does that look like? We've had to let go of some of the autonomy in favor of consistency. ESL teachers kind of had lots of control when those kids came to them. Those were their kids, and they kind of had free reign to do what they feel was needed. And so now we've asked them to hone in more on tier one. But what we're finding is that it's a more cohesive student-centered approach. Our multilingual learners are having more success in the classroom. Co-teaching is something that is another shift, and we have not done that before. Typically, our ESL teachers and our SPED teachers would push in, and they may work with a small group. They may be more of an assistant type role rather than a true co-teacher. And so that's something else. Teachers are having to let go of their classroom and share that with another teacher, right? And so that is difficult, especially at the elementary school. We find that they're very protective of their classroom. And so to have someone else come in and share and teach together is is sort of out of the norm for them. And so co-teaching training is a priority for us that we're going to have to focus on. And what does that look like? One thing I wish we had known earlier was the importance of front-loading Tier 1 content for our MLL students. As I said before, we have focused far too long on our pull-out models, our isolated support, as opposed to giving a more coherent experience for those kids so that they can see more success in the Tier 1 classroom. So I wish we had known that earlier. Another one is, prioritize the co-teaching and really give training around that, which is kind of where we are now, moving towards that more inclusive model.
One of our next steps will be, let's bring our principals in again. Do they want to just work up the grade levels, do first and second? How many grade levels do we want to try to get in for next year and keep kindergarten where they're at? Let kindergarten teachers sort of lead the charge for that, since they've had a little taste of it working forward.
Well, it's a process. The whole cycle is a process. So yeah, I'd love to have come in year one when I took over this job, because when we started HQIM, I was a school leader. So I would have loved to have known what I do now. But mostly affirming teachers for the work they do, because it's so very hard, but also realizing that we have to have a growth mindset. We have to be able to realize that we can't teach the way we've always taught and think we're going to have the results that our district needs, our students need, and the outcomes for our students. So that mindset just has to shift. It really does. And some teachers do it so well, and some that haven't done it, and they realize, and they end up retiring or leaving, because it is different. We're asking more, but we're also asking more of students.
Our teachers, I think, are more confident because they're able to ask those questions. Our MLL teachers are able to help provide scaffolds, ideas, strategies in the planning process. So the teachers are more prepared in the classroom for those students. And we've discussed specific students and how we're going to help them. And so I think both our MLL teachers and our regular education teachers are just more prepared in the classroom for their lessons.